Every big name in show business came out for Kamala Harris, from Oprah to Clooney to Beyonce, and she lost every swing state. A survey of Ohio voters found Taylor Swift's endorsement actually had a negative impact, with 24% saying it made them less enthusiastic about her as a candidate. Celebrities aren't helping, and why would they? In a country where the big issue now is affordability, outside of, Springsteen and a few others, celebrities don't strike people as relatable or in touch. And what their activism mostly activates is eye rolls.
Imagine standing in a grocery line, doing that quiet mental budgeting people know far too well. If the eggs go back, the chicken stays, but then dinner becomes a creative exercise in survival. Right as you reach that conclusion, your phone lights up with a celebrity explaining who deserves your vote. It is not a casual opinion either. It is a polished, confident lecture delivered like civic wisdom discovered somewhere between Pilates and a private flight. That tone is exactly what Bill Maher criticized, and the bluntness of it makes people react instantly. The frustration is not subtle. It sparks that familiar eye roll people reserve for moments that feel out of touch with reality. The broader question is why celebrity political influence keeps stumbling and what that reveals about party messaging. Before anything else, it helps to acknowledge an obvious truth. Celebrities are not ordinary citizens, and that difference is fundamental to their status. They live within systems designed to remove everyday friction from their lives. Assistants manage problems, travel happens privately, homes multiply across cities, accessories cost more than many annual salaries, even their personal branding can feel distant from typical experience. None of that erases their talent or cultural impact. Many performers create meaningful art that resonates deeply with audiences across generations. They shape culture, inspire creativity, and provide moments of shared emotional experience. But artistic influence does not automatically translate into political credibility. Skill in entertainment is not the same as expertise in governance. Maher's broader point centers on that distinction. Admiration for performance does not require deference to political guidance. When fame becomes treated as authority, skepticism naturally grows. That tension defines the uneasy relationship between celebrity culture and democratic persuasion today.
Stars, they're not just like us. They're just not. They fly private. They have 5 houses all over the world. They give their kids ridiculous names. They make candles that smell like the vagina. They wear crazy amounts of jewelry. They buy castles. They buy towns. They buy islands. They have Shark Tank.
Critics often worry that questioning celebrity political influence sounds like telling performers to stay silent. That is not the argument. Public figures have every right to express opinions like any other citizen. The concern is how political messaging treats fame as if recognition equals qualification. Elections are not concerts, and voters are not audiences waiting for spectacle. Policy problems cannot be solved through appearances, endorsements, or carefully staged moments of enthusiasm. The timing makes the disconnect sharper because affordability dominates everyday concerns for many households. Rent, groceries, fuel, childcare, healthcare, and debt shape daily decision-making in immediate ways. When a wealthy public figure appears to offer guidance, the message can feel unintentionally distant from lived experience. Instead of inspiration, some voters perceive condescension, as though struggles are being observed from far away. That reaction explains why Maher's criticism resonates beyond partisan boundaries. The issue becomes one of communication strategy rather than individual personalities. A party claiming to represent working people must consider who speaks most visibly on its behalf. When prominent messengers appear insulated from routine financial pressures, credibility can weaken. The gap is not always ideological, often it is experiential. Voters notice when representatives seem unfamiliar with ordinary trade-offs. That perception alone can shape trust.
They show up 3 hours late for their own concerts, and people still go. Please, it's okay. You're stars. We like you for who you are. Insulated divas whose talent allows you to pig out on the finer things in life, because we all need something to aspire to. But being talented, which you are, isn't the same as knowing things or having the credibility to advise people on their politics.
Most voters do not view celebrities as malicious or harmful figures in public life. The friction comes from perceived performance rather than personal character. Audiences recognize when messaging feels scripted to appear relatable instead of genuinely grounded. The effect resembles corporate attempts at casual online humor that miss their intended audience entirely. For many independents, celebrity political advocacy can resemble branding rather than civic engagement. The impression becomes a contest over image rather than a conversation about material conditions. Maher's underlying argument separates admiration from authority in a straightforward way. A person may be widely admired while still lacking special insight into governance. Public familiarity often blurs distinctions between portrayed roles and real-world experience. When actors play leaders, some viewers subconsciously associate them with actual decision-making environments. When musicians perform songs about hardship, audiences may assume direct knowledge of ordinary economic strain. Performance can create emotional authenticity without guaranteeing experiential accuracy. Once the performance ends, the symbolic role dissolves and ordinary reality returns. What remains is a prominent individual sharing a viewpoint shaped by a particular social position. Recognizing that difference does not dismiss their voice. It simply restores proportion between influence and expertise.
And of course, this is where celebrities say, how dare you? We're citizens with just as much right to speak out. Agreed, you absolutely do. I'm just saying, don't.
Supporters often argue that celebrities help raise awareness, and that claim is not without merit. Public figures can spotlight causes, attract donations, and draw attention to issues that might otherwise be overlooked. Their visibility can expand conversations beyond typical political spaces. The concern emerges when celebrity presence shifts from amplification to central representation. Once a political movement becomes closely tied to a famous personality, serious concerns can start to resemble entertainment content. When politics begins to feel packaged for consumption, public trust can erode. Many voters do not want civic participation to resemble marketing. Maher's criticism emphasizes this reaction sharply. He argues that celebrity advocacy frequently provokes skepticism rather than engagement. The tension often centers on perceived inconsistency between message and lifestyle. Environmental advocacy provides a clear illustration because behavior is highly visible. When influential figures promote reduced emissions while regularly using private jets, the contrast invites criticism. The public sees a mismatch between instruction and example. Advising ordinary citizens to change habits while maintaining visibly carbon-intensive lifestyles weakens persuasive power. Rather than modeling leadership, the message risks appearing performative, undermining credibility and reducing the seriousness of the underlying issue.
Now enjoy this fun photo collage of some of your favorite stars and politicians who speak about the need to reduce our carbon footprint, but who are always on private planes. That's right, all of them. If you don't see a celebrity's picture here, it's because we weren't allowed to use it. Or their series got canceled. But all the environmentalists of Hollywood and Washington do it. Their position on climate change is, we must do more to stop pouring carbon into the air, except for me when I want to go somewhere and then I take a private jet.
Maher acknowledges that convenience and scheduling pressures are real factors for high-profile individuals. In certain circumstances, private travel may be the only practical option. The problem, as many voters perceive it, is not occasional necessity but consistent pattern. When behavior appears routine rather than exceptional, it creates an image that conflicts with public messaging. Symbolic moments such as private travel connected to environmental events intensify that perception. Once inconsistency becomes visible, public attention shifts away from policy substance toward credibility. Many voters may not follow legislative details closely, but they recognize authenticity when they see it. They distinguish between individuals who embody their stated values and those who appear to promote them selectively. When behavior contradicts messaging, disagreement often evolves into resentment. Being instructed to adopt sacrifices by someone who appears exempt from them can feel alienating. That emotional response carries political consequences. It reinforces narratives that certain leaders or movements are disconnected from everyday experience. Whether the perception is universally accurate becomes secondary to its influence. Politics operates through interpretation as much as through policy. If one side appears aligned with high-profile figures perceived as distant, opponents can position themselves as comparatively grounded without needing flawless records themselves.
Celebrities don't know about the real world. So Democrats, it's great you have all the big celebs, but people see them as an arm of the Democratic Party, which they already suspect for lacking common sense. I know. I know the celebrities mean well, and we thank them for having their heart in the right place, but just do you. Do what you do so well. Use your extraordinary talents for the noble cause of bringing relief from the problems that ribbons and pins can't fix. I know it's very important to you that you feel that you're making a difference, so let me assure you, you are. You're making independents vote Republican.
Maher frames independent voters as particularly sensitive to perceived inauthenticity. They tend to resist messaging that feels promotional rather than conversational. Celebrity endorsements can sometimes resemble curated displays of virtue rather than attempts at genuine persuasion. The presentation may appear oriented toward approval from existing supporters rather than outreach to undecided audiences. That distinction matters because persuasion requires trust more than visibility. Endorsements often energize individuals who already share the same political preferences. For those supporters, affirmation from admired figures can feel encouraging and reinforcing. For skeptics or undecided voters, however, the same message may produce the opposite effect. Advice delivered from a position of privilege can feel less like guidance and more like pressure. Psychological resistance often follows perceived pressure, even when the underlying message is reasonable. People are inclined to defend autonomy when they feel directed or judged. Emotional reactions, including defensiveness or contrarianism, can shape political choices as strongly as policy preferences. Democratic participation reflects human tendencies as much as rational calculation. Messaging strategies that overlook those tendencies risk strengthening opposition rather than building support across diverse segments of the electorate.
Ed and Greta, that's who walks the walk. Everyone else is full of shit, and I'm done being full of shit. I can take being a bad environmentalist because almost all of us are, but I can't take being a hypocrite. Now, I always justified renting a plane because I only used it for work and literally could not get to most of my stand-up gigs on time any other way. How do you think I did it all those years? I said goodnight here at 8 p.m. and was on stage in Vegas at 10. But I don't need to do stand-up, like tomorrow night in Albuquerque.
Maher also challenges the assumption that confidence signals expertise. In celebrity culture, confidence often functions as currency. Public figures operate within environments shaped by admiration, professional insulation, and constant affirmation. Approval becomes routine feedback, and repeated applause can blur the distinction between popularity and accuracy. When validation replaces scrutiny, certainty can expand beyond areas of genuine knowledge. Maher references comments by Dave Chappelle regarding free expression, not to target an individual personally but to illustrate a broader dynamic. A well-known figure can present a provocative comparison, and the statement rapidly circulates across media platforms. Visibility transforms a spontaneous remark into a widely debated position. Audiences engage with the claim as though prominence guarantees depth. The concern is not that famous individuals intend harm, but that fame amplifies perspectives regardless of evidentiary support. When influence is measured by reach rather than rigor, public discourse can shift towards spectacle. As political conversation becomes increasingly shaped by visibility, attention gravitates toward those with the largest platforms rather than those offering the most carefully developed proposals.
You rail against privilege, but you avail yourself of the greatest privilege of all, to remain clueless. Dave Chappelle lashed out at me last month because I called him out for saying there was more free speech in Saudi Arabia than here. Well, I was right. What he said was stupid. America has many problems, including free speech issues on both left and right, but we're real different than Saudi Arabia. If you don't believe me, try opening a lesbian art gallery there.
Maher extends his criticism beyond individual celebrities to examine broader patterns within contemporary activism. He focuses on the performative elements that often accompany public engagement, including symbolic gestures, visual signaling, and highly visible declarations of concern. These practices can communicate values, yet they may also blur the boundary between expression and performance. Maher's argument emphasizes contribution through craft rather than proclamation. Artists, in his view, influence society most effectively by creating work that resonates emotionally and intellectually, rather than by presenting endorsements as transformative civic acts. His sharpest claim suggests that highly visible advocacy can unintentionally alienate segments of the electorate, particularly those who already feel distant from elite cultural spaces. Whether universally accurate or not, the perception of moral exhibitionism has become a recognizable feature of political discourse. Many individuals express fatigue with communication that frames civic life as a stage for public virtue. Economic pressure intensifies that reaction. When households confront rising costs and daily constraints, symbolic messaging can appear detached from immediate concerns. Political engagement risks resembling spectacle when attention centers on personalities rather than outcomes. Maher connects this dynamic to a wider pattern that includes elected officials themselves. The criticism targets a culture in which directives for public sacrifice coexist with visibly privileged lifestyles. Perceived inconsistency undermines institutional trust, regardless of policy substance. Once trust erodes, persuasion becomes difficult even when proposals may hold merit. Public response shifts from evaluation of ideas to judgment of credibility. When audiences perceive dissonance between message and example, attention fragments and disengagement grows. In that environment, electoral behavior can become shaped by impression rather than analysis. Messaging that emphasizes image over lived alignment may inadvertently encourage voters to prioritize perceived authenticity above policy detail.
No one can resist it. John Kerry is our climate czar, and he uses a private jet. It's like if the Secretary of Homeland Security smuggled drugs in his butt. People take jets to environmental conferences. If you could run TED Talks on hypocrisy,
Technologies, including mixed results. This admission functions rhetorically by modeling fallibility rather than authority. The contrast highlights what many observers perceive as absent from high-profile advocacy: transparent acknowledgement of limitations. Audiences often respond more favorably to candor than to declarations of moral certainty. Maher also addresses generational assumptions about virtue. He challenges the idea that younger demographics are inherently more principled, suggesting that economic circumstance can influence behavior as much as ethical commitment. As an illustration, he references enthusiasm for technologies associated with significant energy consumption. The example underscores a broader tension between stated priorities and practical incentives. The argument ultimately emphasizes consistency between belief, behavior, and public messaging as a foundation for credible persuasion.
to valets who were driving a better car than me. I had the first Tesla in 2010, and honestly, both these cars sucked.
Whether one fully agrees or not, the argument connects to a broader pattern. Many people admire wealth, comfort, and the freedom associated with elite lifestyles. When public figures who visibly enjoy those privileges urge widespread sacrifice, the message can feel contradictory. It suggests a moral standard enforced downward rather than shared equally. That perception combines resentment with perceived judgment, a mixture that weakens persuasive impact. From a strategic standpoint, relying heavily on high-profile endorsers risks associating political messaging with social distance rather than shared experience. Maher frames this as a caution directed at democratic strategy. Visibility and recognition do not automatically translate into credibility or influence. When voters sense condescension, communication is often interpreted as arrogance instead of leadership. The distinction matters politically. Persuasion depends not only on policy content but also on perceived alignment between messenger and audience. When that alignment appears absent, even well-intentioned messages can lose effectiveness.
Everyone else could fly commercial. Why don't they? Ask anyone who tried to get home.
An alternative approach does not require silencing well-known individuals or excluding them from public conversation. The central adjustment involves emphasis rather than prohibition. Messaging can prioritize voices with direct experience of the conditions policies aim to address. Communication rooted in everyday realities often carries a different persuasive quality. When discussions reflect familiar challenges, such as rising housing costs, medical expenses, or financial uncertainty, audiences may perceive greater relevance. Authenticity in this context refers less to style than to demonstrated proximity to lived concerns. Maher's broader implication is that policy proposals associated with economic relief could resonate widely if presentation aligns with audience experience. The contrast he highlights involves tone as much as substance. Messaging that appears instructional or detached risks evoking distance rather than solidarity. High-visibility endorsements may energize existing supporters, yet persuasion among uncertain or disengaged voters often requires identification rather than admiration. Strategic communication therefore benefits from alignment between messenger credibility and audience circumstance. Celebrity participation can still contribute through amplification or cultural influence without occupying central narrative space. The distinction lies in role, not presence. Public response frequently reflects perceptions of respect and recognition. When individuals feel their circumstances are acknowledged rather than evaluated, receptivity can increase. Maher's critique ultimately centers on perceived hierarchy within political communication. The risk he identifies is not celebrity involvement itself, but over-reliance on symbolic prestige. If campaigns appear to prioritize recognition over relatability, audiences may question representational sincerity. The broader takeaway emphasizes proportion between image and substance. Political advocacy that foregrounds shared experience, practical outcomes, and consistent example may foster greater trust across diverse constituencies. The argument concludes that voters rarely object to prominence alone. Resistance emerges when prominence appears disconnected from common conditions. Recalibrating emphasis toward experiential credibility may therefore strengthen communication without limiting participation from any particular group.